Hello, everyone. Welcome to the April 2018 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group, our last study group of the month. I can't believe it. It's coming to you live from our headquarters here in Tallahassee, Florida. My name is James Messer. I'll be your host for this next hour of Q&A. Listen in during this next hour for questions, answers. We'll go through detail. I'll be taking comments from the chat room. If you're watching this on the YouTube side live, then you'll notice there's no chat room on YouTube. You have to go to professormesser.com/live, and there's a chat room right there, which also has the YouTube stream there as well. So it makes it very easy. And we're going to be doing interactive Q&A for this first hour. After the first hour, we shift gears and we start the after show, which sometimes is longer than the regular show, where I open up phone lines, and it's open phone lines. You can talk about anything you'd like during that next hour. We've got plenty of questions to go through today. First, I want to thank everyone for being here, for participating. I couldn't do it without you. Thank you for your ongoing support as well with my video course. Of course, every single one of my video courses is available for you to watch absolutely free every minute. There's nothing behind a paywall. There's nothing you have to register for. I'm not going to bother you with emails. You just go to my website and you can learn whatever you need to learn from A+, Network+, Security+, Microsoft. There's a bunch of stuff there. There's plenty of things there. But we're going to today just focus on Security Plus. If you wanted an offline version of all of this, you could get it at professormesser.com/getsecplus, which is all of my videos, audio versions of those videos, my course notes in a PDF form, plenty that's there. We have a lot that's going on here. We're finishing up some Network Plus videos. I'm busy in the studio every day, churning away. I'm either shooting or editing. If you want to follow what's going on, you can catch us on professormesser.com/Twitter. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. And of course, don't pay full price for your vouchers. There's a voucher discount on the website at professormesser.com/vouchers. I have some Security Plus 401 exams out on the website that you can take absolutely free at professormesser.com/popquiz. So there's over 100 questions there for Security Plus. We don't quite yet have the 501 questions out because we take those questions from the study groups. 501 has been out since the October timeframe. So there's not enough questions yet to put into that, but I'm sure we'll get some out there eventually. I also have an archive of this study group in a podcast form. So you can subscribe to the podcast with your favorite podcast catching program. You can also listen directly on the page professormesser.com/podcasts. Put that in, and I've got A+, Network+, Security Plus is there. Now we've got well over a year, I guess, of content there. Plenty available. But of course, as far as Security Plus is concerned, you have some decisions to make. We're going to do this Security Plus study group today, but of course there are 2 Security Plus exams that you could take. You only have to pass one of these, but you have to choose which one you want. For the past 3 years or so, there has been the SY0-401 exam. That's the number of the exam. It was released in April of 2014. And the SY0-401 is retiring in July, at the end of July. So July 31st, the SY0-401 goes away. Now, they do that so that there's a little bit of overlap. So if you've been studying for the 401, just keep studying. As long as you can take that exam and pass it before July 31st, you will be Security Plus certified. And there's no delineation between how you got that certification. Just go to take the 401, you're Security Plus certified. Take the 501, you're Security Plus certified. Same certification. The SY0-501 was released at the end of last year, October the 4th, 2017. It's not really been out for a horribly long time here. It's relatively new. So you have the choice right now. Now, if you're like me, and it takes you a long time to study, or maybe you're just now starting your Security Plus studies here in April of 2018, you might want to think of just starting with the 501. Forget all the old 401 test. Really, there's not really anything old on there. It's just a different exam. You may want to focus on the 501 because you've got about 3 years until that particular exam will even think of being retired. So that may help you a little bit if you're like me and it takes you a long time to pass an exam. That may indeed be the case. whichever one you take, it is exactly the same format. I don't think one is really more difficult than the other. I think the difficulty levels are effectively the same between them. It's one exam. There's a maximum of 90 questions. You may get fewer than 90 questions, and you've got 90 minutes to get through all of those. The passing score on this is a 750 on a range between 100 and 900. I'm not sure why I tell you that, because that doesn't make any sense, does it? But there it is. That's what it is. They really don't tell you how they grade it. Just do your best and hope it gets over 750. I guess that would be the best way to do it. And this is a mix of multiple choice questions and what CompTIA calls performance-based questions. So you might get fill in the blank. You might get matching. You may have to put things in order from highest to lowest or lowest to highest. They may show you a diagram. They may put you at a command prompt and ask you what to do with that. So you need to be prepared. I have a performance-based question we're going to do today, at least one. So you'll get a feel for the type of thing we're talking about. Now in the chat room, good question, which is how much difference is there between the 401 and the 501? As I mentioned, the 401 is going to be available until July 31st, and the 501 you've got well over 3 years at this point. But the real question is, how similar are they? And the answer, quite honestly, will surprise you. They're not similar at all. They are very different exams. They are remarkably different. And I went through every single topic on the 501, and I compared it to the 401. So here's some hard numbers for you. The SY0-501 has about 758 topics as I calculate them. I calculate a little bit differently, but that's close enough. There's over 750 topics on the exam. But if we had to calculate what's different from the 401, 466 of those topics are not even on the 401. They're brand new to the SY0-501. That means over 60% of the SY0-501 is a brand new exam, effectively. 60% of it's different. Brand new from the 401 exam. So the moral of this, by the way, is that, and the fact the chat room's even asking about this, but I have 401 material. Can't I just use that? No, don't do that. No, you should always study from materials that match the version of the exam you're going to take. And in this particular case, this is remarkably different. So you have to really take this into account. If you're planning to take the SY0-401, study from SY0-401 materials. If you're planning to take the 501, study from SY0-501 materials. Do not mix the exam versions. You will be sorry. It will be a sad day in Mudville. You do not want that to happen. So make sure that it all matches up for you. That if you're planning to take the 401, study from 401 materials. If you're planning to take the 501, study from 501 materials. Do not mix and match, and you're going to be just fine. Going to be just fine. So that's important. So if you're already studying for the 401, keep studying for the 401. Don't stop. You have until the end of July to take the 401 exam, so keep it going. Do not switch. Don't switch in midstream. Why would you do that? They're completely different exams. You'd be starting over effectively. As long as you can get that exam done by July 31st, and trust me, people will be taking the 401 exam on July 31st. I assure you, people take them all the way up to the deadline. It's remarkable. So make sure that you have enough time and make sure you have it done by July 31st. So that should help you make some decisions about what you want to do with which version of the exam. And thankfully, by the end of July, it won't even be a question because all we'll have is the 501. This is Q&A today, though. We're going to do Q&A, and all of the Q&A we do in here today will be from the 501 exam. A number of these topics, though, are also covered on the 401. But I've got about 3 years worth of study groups like this that you can go back and watch the replays on ProfessorMesser.com. So this particular study group, all of the questions will apply to the 501. A number of them will also apply to the 401. But I'm really focusing on building questions for the 501 at this point because there's plenty more things you can always go back and look at. But it doesn't hurt to learn these things. The way that you're going to answer these questions live is to go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. That will take you directly to the page where you can answer questions. In fact, there's a question right now on that page that you can answer if you go to there and everything looks okay. There is also an app that you can get for your mobile device. You may have seen these mobile devices people are carrying around, and they use these things called apps. And you can download the app from your favorite app store. You want the Socrative student app, and it will ask you for a room number, the room name. The room name is Professor Messer, Professormesser. So if you make it into that room, you will see a question. If you go into a room and you don't see a question, you're in the wrong room. Make sure you spell everything correctly there, and you'll be just fine. The question you're going to see there is this one. Let's see how we do with this question. This is from last month. So hopefully some of you remember last month's questions. This question is, which of these attack types modifies database requests to gain access to unauthorized information? Is it, I'm going to hide the answers here, and we're going to show you what it is. Is it an injection attack, a DDoS attack, a replay attack, an amplification attack, or a spoofing attack? Now, if you think you know the answer to these, you should go to professormesser.com/QA and answer this question. Do not answer in the chat room as we're going through this. We're going to try to keep this and figure it out ourselves. No hints in the chat room. Don't mention anything there. Go to professormesser.com/QA and answer it right there, and you'll be just fine. Hopefully you can see this question. In fact, as you're answering it, I'm seeing the answers show up. So I can see you as you're answering these, and you can see here 84% of you remember what we did last month because you have answered injection attack. Which of these attack types modifies database requests to gain access to unauthorized information? Yeah, that's a SQL injection right there. That is an injection attack. You're absolutely right. 9% of you said spoofing attack. Not quite there. We're not spoofing anything. We're not pretending we're someone else to get into that database, at least not generally. That's not our best answer. Amplification attack is not really used that way. Replay attack, we're not replaying anything. And DDoS, we're not coming at this database to bring it down from multiple locations. And the DDoS doesn't really give you access to unauthorized information. So that should give you a feel for how these questions work. We're going to have brand new questions this month where we're going to go through all of these different things. There's plenty to go through. What I want to do, though, is start with a brand new question. So everybody clean your slates. You can stay exactly on this web page that you've opened up because I'm going to click a button and a new question will automatically appear. So if you've seen this question and you see these answers, you will be able to see what's going on with this. So let's first do our first question. And one of the things I like to do is give you a question that is very similar to the performance-based questions you might get at the beginning of your actual exam. As I mentioned, a lot of the exam is multiple choice, but the first set of questions on the exam are performance-based questions. It might be a command prompt, it might be a fill in the blank, it might be a matching, it might be putting things in a particular order. Who knows what it happens to be? So I've got for you a performance-based question right off the bat here on the study group. Here we go. Performance-based question is, I want to match the technology with the implementation. And I've got a number of technologies and implementations here. There's 5 of them, or 6 of them, A, B, C, D, E, F. And then I've got 6 different technologies here. These are not in the right order. If you answered A1, B2, C3, D4, E5, and F6, you get it wrong. You should match these up in your answer. And I'm going to change this on the Socrative so you can now put those answers in. But I want you to step through these. So if you're listening in, here are the technologies and the implementations. Let's start with the implementations. It's A, validate a digital signature of a certificate authority. B is perform multiple rounds of password hashing. C is authenticate to an LDAP database. D is securely exchange encryption keys over a public channel. E is wireless network communication is encrypted. And F is increase password randomization. Now, the 6 technologies that you should match to that are 1, CCMP, 2, Radius, 3, Diffie-Hellman, 4, public key, 5, SALT, and 6, key stretching. So you have to somehow match these together. And there's a 1-to-1 match here. So I made it a little bit easier. I didn't give you more of one than the other so that you don't have to, none of these are doubled up. So that should help you a little bit. It's a one-to-one relationship between the technologies and the implementation of the technologies. This, by the way, is a very common mechanism on the exam, that they will give you an abbreviation, for example, like number one, CCNP. They never ask you what CCNP means. They don't ask you what that abbreviation stands for. They don't really care so much about that. They want to know, how do you use that technology? How do you use that abbreviation? How does that apply to security and Security Plus exam? So hopefully that's something you were able to piece together from all of these different pieces, matching these technologies with the implementation. Hopefully you've been able to see those. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. And I'm seeing people put the answers in. You're starting to type these in. There's a lot here to go through. Let's change our screen a little bit. There's a lot to go through because you have to go through all of these different configurations, but you can just put in A1, B2, C3, D4, etc. You don't have to type them all in, fortunately. That's why I put the number and the letter in there, because I knew this would be a fill in the blank for you, because Socrative doesn't have a matching thing. That would be it. This is one where I always tell people, don't worry what the abbreviation stands for so much. You need to know how it's used. And sometimes how it's used will help you remember the abbreviation. So they just sort of work together and how that works. Let's see how we did. A number of you have answered. We're going to, how many of you have answered this? A good number. A lot of you have not. A lot of you are still Googling. See, I know what you're doing. This isn't like HQ. You don't have 5 seconds to answer the question. This is one where you have to know you've got some time. You could Google things around, but I wish you wouldn't. You should at least try to take a stab at this. Of course, no one would ever Google. If you are watching this on the YouTube side, I have a chat at professormesser.com/live. You're welcome to join. And I'm watching people talk in the chat. And give me feedback, tell me what's going on. So let's step through these. We'll start with the first technology, which is validate the digital signature of a certificate authority. How would we do that? We would, of course, public key. That is exactly what that is, public key. Maybe that's something that if you've ever tried to understand how a particular certificate is validated, it's from the public keys that are already in your browser. Your browser is a big list of certificate authorities and the public keys in there, and it's able to validate these digital signatures, because that's what the CA does. All of the certificate authority really does when it comes to these types of web server certificates anyway, is it takes the cert and goes, I think you're who you say you are, digitally signs it, hands it back. That's it. That's all they do. That is the extent of the certificate authority. But with that digital signature, we can validate that they at least signed off on it. And your browser will recognize that it's valid. And if one doesn't work out, if somebody provides you with a certificate that has not been digitally signed using this asymmetric encryption and public key technology, then you're going to get an error. The second one on our list was B, perform multiple rounds of password hashing. And if you've ever seen this is also on the 401 exam, both of these so far, both 401 and 501 questions. And you can see that is key stretching. Key stretching is when you can take and maybe hash a password, but the hash isn't very strong. So we'll hash the hash of the password. And to make it a little stronger, we'll hash the hash of the password. Then we'll hash the hash of the hash of the password. It goes on and on. You can go 100 rounds of hashing and see where you come up with that. Of course, to be able to evaluate that, you have to undo that hash afterwards and see if it all works out. But that is one where you can kind of also at least put a few more stumbling blocks in if somebody's trying to do a brute force attack of your passwords. Let's do number C, which is authenticate to an LDAP database. What would that be? Well, that would be number 2, Radius. Radius is a very good way to provide authentication from a AAA server, from the Radius server. So you can centralize all your usernames and passwords. No matter where you log in, you can authenticate against that database, that Radius database. Letter D, securely exchange encryption keys over a public channel. How do you do that? We had a conversation about this in the chat room on the website over the last week or so. I think that's where I got the idea. How does that work? How can you be on the internet and somehow exchange encryption keys without anybody else getting their hands on the encryption key? Well, the way you do that's through Diffie-Hellman. Diffie-Hellman is a way to perform a key exchange securely over a public channel. Anybody could listen in if they wanted to. They could grab all the packets. They can see your entire conversation and still would not be able to gain access to your encryption key. It's like magic, and it works great. Letter E is wireless network communication is encrypted. Well, if you're familiar with WPA2, then you probably know that the encryption mechanism within WPA2 is CCMP. CCMP is the wireless encryption that happens on WPA2 on your 802.11 networks. And the last option is F, increase password randomization. How can we take a password and randomize it further from what a user has already entered? Well, just add a little bit of salt. Add just a sprinkling of salt onto a password, and you'll have a much stronger password. It'll be a little bit different. So if everybody used exactly the same password, everybody is using the password Ninja, and we looked at the list of hashes for this, they would all be different. Even though everyone's password is the same, they'd all be different because we were adding a different salt to every single one of those. So that does come in handy for increasing the randomization of those passwords. So hopefully you got those right. It was A, validate the digital signature of a certificate authority was public key. B was perform multiple rounds of password hashing. That was key stretching. C was authenticate to an LDAP database. That was radius. D was securely exchange encryption keys over a public channel. That's Diffie-Hellman. E was wireless network communication is encrypted. That was CCMP. And increase password randomization was SALT. A4, B6, C2, D3, E1, and F5. Wow. Okay, that was your matching performance-based question of the month. Hopefully you were able to get a number of those right. Maybe you learned some new technology on that question. Hopefully that can help you. I've got some multiple choice questions now. We'll go into the normal part. You'll probably have a handful of these performance-based questions on the actual exam, but we're going to move on to a multiple choice question. This multiple choice question is, what kind of vulnerability is most associated with the WPS design flaw? No, there's a lot going on in this question. What kind of vulnerability is most associated with the WPS design flaw? Is it A, buffer overflow? Is it B, database injection? Is it C, brute force attack? Is it D, man in the middle? Or is it E, Trojan horse? One of those would be the vulnerability that is most associated with the WPS design flaw. Hopefully you're not using WPS on your network. Although it's a little bit better these days, still not 100% perfect. Probably not a great thing to use. So hopefully that's something that you've either disabled or it's not enabled by default. We'll have to find out when we start talking about WPS. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You'll be able to get this one right and figure out the details. All these vulnerabilities, so many different problems, so many different ways these problems can manifest themselves, so many different ways they can be exploited. This would be a good one to have there. If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to the professormesser.com/QA link and answer right there. That would be good when that happens. Maybe someone can go through those and figure out all the different flaws and all of. We should have a big list of the different flaws and the different exploits for those flaws. That would be good to have there. Let's see how we did with this one. If we flip back over, how'd we do? Well, let's see. Socrative tells us 59% of us said brute force attack. 32% of us said man in the middle. And then it drops off pretty well from there. 7% said buffer overflow. And a tie for fourth, 1% each said database injection and Trojan horse. So WPS, this is the one that is a little bit of a problem. And it was something we found out after it was already released, but it was pretty obvious if you look at the design of WPS that this was going to be a problem. So December 2011 is when we recognize that WPS had a pretty bad design flaw, which is that the way WPS works, it's a way that wireless devices can join your wireless network without having to do passphrases or hex codes or any other thing special. You just give someone an 8-digit code that's usually written on the bottom of your access point, or it's one that you can configure in the configuration of your access point. And it's just an 8-digit number. Somebody can type in that 8-digit number and they have access to your network. And you'd think 8 digits, it's really 7 digits in a checksum, but that's 10 million possible combinations. That would be really difficult to guess. You're going to have a very hard time doing that. However, the problem is that the PIN itself is evaluated in 2 parts. The first 4 digits and then the last 3 digits. And of course, that last digit's a checksum. So the last 4 are really the last 3, which means now you're down to 10,000 possibilities in the first half and 1,000 possibilities in the second half. Now we're getting a lot easier. 11,000 options here to be able to figure out what the number is. And what people did was they just tried all of them. Just go through every possible number that this could be until it hits. And so at the beginning, there was no way to do denial of service or no way to stop someone from coming in and doing this over and over and over again. There was no slowdown. There was no lockouts. There was nothing. So they could sit there in a number of hours, and indeed here, about 4 hours, you could go through every single one of them and gain access to someone's wireless network. That's not really that secure. That's not secure at all. That's an awful type of security. That is not what we should do. But the part where you're going through every possible scenario to try to figure out what it is, that's C, brute force attack. 62% of you chose brute force attack and got that absolutely right. It is not a man in the middle. We're not sitting in the middle of a conversation and sending traffic back and forth or modifying the traffic as it goes by or watching the traffic as it goes by. You really can't see that happening. So man in the middle wouldn't work either. That would not be the one we want to choose. The 6% of you that said buffer overflow, that's not a buffer overflow. Buffer overflow means they're looking for 8 characters and we try to cram 10 characters in there. Something weird might happen. That's not how WPS works either. It's not a database injection. There's no database here at all. Usually that's a SQL database. There's no SQL database here. And Trojan horse is when it pretends to be something and it's really something else. Well, there's nobody fooling anybody with this. It's pretty obvious what somebody's trying to do is to go through all of those and try to find the right one. That's a brute force attack. So if you answered C, brute force attack, got it absolutely right. Well done. Let's do another one. This question is about this technology. The question is, which of these would be most associated with a SIM? Which of these would be most associated with a SIM? Would it be A, syslog, B, SSH, C, public and private keys, D, HTTPS, or E, LDAP? One of those would be most associated with a SIM. Now, if you don't know what a SIM is, then we've got a problem. You can take a guess, maybe if you don't know, which does bring up a good point that if you don't know one of these questions on the exam, they're asking a question that has something you have no idea what they're talking about. There's no possible way you will be able to figure out what this is because it looks like some other language is in front of you. If that's the case, just take a stab. Just guess. Don't leave it blank. Always put an answer down. You've got a chance. Maybe they give you 4 or 5 different options. That's a 20 to 25% chance of getting it right. So at least put something in there. You're not penalized, as far as we can tell, you're not penalized for guessing. Sometimes you can take some of these exams, and if you get a question wrong, you get points taken off. Fortunately, that's not the case here. It's not Jeopardy, where if you guess wrong, they take money away. So you can always leave something in there at least. Never finish or never submit your exam with blank entries. And don't let your time run out. If it runs out, just mark everything A. Maybe that's a good way to do it, is to have all that there. So which of these would be most associated with a SIM? We went through those options there. Syslog, SSH, public and private keys, HTTPS, and LDAP. Well, 73% of you said syslog. Is that the right one or not? Because single digits for really everything else. We've got 9% said public and private keys. We've got 7 or 8% now say SSH, 6% said LDAP, and 3% say HTTPS. Yeah, I do throw a lot of acronyms in there for a reason. I need you to know what those acronyms are and how they're used. In this case, 74% of you with syslog, we're pretty spot on with that one. Syslog is a standard way to take log files from really almost any device and send them to a syslog consolidation tool like a SIM. This is where you would have integration from, you tell your switch, send all the logs to this SIM. Tell your router, send all your logs to the SIM. Tell the firewall, send all your logs to the SIM, and it's going to send them in this standard syslog format. There's also, some people love to keep these logs around, and you can somehow find different ways to do that. Some people will use a worm drive, which is a write once, read many, kind of an optical type drive, so that it will save the log files, and now you have an archive that nobody can delete. So that comes in handy too, to have all of those things there. Maybe that's something you're already doing. Maybe you already have a SIM. Maybe you're planning to use a SIM. Or maybe you've looked at your switch, or your router, your firewall, your servers, your IPS, your WAP, just goes on and on. All of these devices talk the syslog language. It's a very standard way to do it. And all of these SIMs are certainly able to grab this data. And it's a very standard format. It's easy to parse. There's nothing really odd about it. All of these SIMs do a very good job at consolidating those things together. So that is the right answer. If you answered A, syslog, 74% of you got that one absolutely right. That does come in handy. If you're ever in a place where you're trying to figure out how to use a security information management or security event management or security information and event management device, this is one of the best ways to collect data over time and create reports from what's going on in your network. It consolidates from so many other places. It is a great centralized way. Not just, it says security in the name, but it's really, everybody can use this. The network team can use this. The application team can use this. It's a fantastic tool. Let's, before we go to the next question though, I've talked about so many different acronyms already in the study group, and Security Plus is full of acronyms, details, information about protocols, information about ports. In the 501, you've got command line. There's tons of encryption. It is an extensive exam. There was somebody I was reading either in the chat room or on a message board this past week, and they said, why do people say these exams are easy? This was a hard exam, and they're right. I've taken every bit of information from my videos and I put them into one single set of course notes. So if you like to write your own course notes, if you like to write notes as you go along, please, of course you should do that. But there's a lot of videos here. There's a lot of content. There's a lot of details. So I wanted to have something that everybody would be able to get every single bit of notes from every single video. This is it. These are my course notes. You can find out about these at professormesser.com/securitycn. This is the 501 version, but I also have a version that's the 401 version as well. It's extensive. There's how many pages in this? Over 90 pages, 96 pages, I think. It's huge. And it goes through every single video. Every single one of them is on here in order, so you can follow along if you're watching the videos. I take all of the graphics, all of the text, everything that's there. It's in these course notes, and it's a great way to support the site. Also, Mrs. Professor Messer told me I needed a paper version too. So you can either purchase a digital version, or you can pay just a little bit more, and I'll print one out and mail it to you. So that's kind of nice to have for these course notes too. All beautiful color in the course notes. So these are really nice books. And it might be something useful too. If you get the printed version, you also get the digital version for free along with it. So you've got the choice. So you get a little something extra to have and available there. And I think it's a good price too. For $20, you get that digital version. And every single bit of this is, every dollar of that goes back to keeping the website going. So I want to thank you so much for your support. For those of you who say you can't pay online, you can buy with a credit card, you can buy with PayPal, or you can buy with Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash. So there are ways anywhere in the world that you can help contribute and keep things going. So people are asking, what's the difference in the physical book and the PDF? It's exactly the same information. It's just printed out. This is a dead tree. So that's the only difference, is that it's physical and you can read it when you're not connected to some kind of digital device. But the content's exactly the same between the two. Hopefully it's something you can use if you'd like to see more about it. You can find out more at professormesser.com/securitycn or see the links at professormesser.com/live if you're watching live right now. And of course, there's links from the main screens and the pull-down pages of that. Plenty of content there. The 401 has about the same amount of pages too. So those of you asking about the 401, I should probably find out. Let's look real quick. The 401, Security Plus for the 501, has those 90-something pages. It might be a little bit different, but it's different content. As I mentioned, the 401 exam is completely different. So kind of interesting how that works with all of those. Hopefully it'll be something worthwhile for you as well. And I want to thank you for your support. Couldn't do it without you. Let's get back to these questions and get this here. This is the next one here. This question is all about a hypervisor. Let's see if I can bring up my screen so I can have you click on it. Here we go. Now you'll see that your Socrative will change. The question is, what type of hypervisor would be the best choice for a bare metal server with no installed operating system? Wow, these hypervisors. You're going to need to know about hypervisors if you're doing anything with security. There's no question. Fortunately, I have some options for you. Those options are A, dedicated, B, single controller, C, type 1, D, orchestrator, and E, sole domain. One of those will be the best choice for a bare metal server with no installed operating system. For those of you in the chat room, if you're looking for links to the 401 or 501 course notes, you can go to professormesser.com/live. I've got links there at the top of the page for you. So you can find everything. They're also in the pull-down menus on the site underneath Security Plus. Hopefully some of you have worked with these hypervisors. Maybe you've installed one of these. This might be very familiar to you. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can put the answer in there. Which of these would be the best choice for a bare metal server with no installed operating system? And so in the chat room, is the exam loaded with acronyms like your video and notes? Yes. Yes, it is. In fact, you'll notice in my notes when there's an acronym, it's always spelled out first time you see it. So every acronym has a spelling associated with it. So that drives me crazy sometimes. Sometimes we use acronyms when we could just say it and it'd be a lot easier to say it. Just say it. Sometimes exactly the same number of syllables if you say it out as the letters are. Reading them makes no sense to me, but there we are. So yes, the exam is completely loaded with acronyms, and it's completely loaded on the Network+, and it's completely loaded on the A+. We love acronyms in technology. We love them. We cannot get enough of acronyms. We're starting to reuse acronyms now in different sections. So that's something you'll just have to be prepared for, to have those things there. Let's see how you did with this one. What type of hypervisor would be the best choice for a bare metal server with no installed operating system? 52% of you, 51% say C, type 1. 20% say A, dedicated. 13% said B, single controller. And then pretty much a tie for fourth is D, orchestrator, and E, sole domain. So which one would this be? Do we really all know? Do we really get the right one? Do we really all think it's type 1? Well, not all of us, but 52% of us think it's type 1. Maybe that's one that works out that way. We're going to fix some things in the chat room here real quick. This is, by the way, hypervisors you will run into often. But there are different types of hypervisors. One is a type 2 hypervisor. You may have even done this. You run a virtual machine on the desktop of the operating system you're using. So you're running Windows 10, you're running Linux, you're running OS 10, and you load up an application like Parallels or VirtualBox. It's a very good example of a free hypervisor. That's a type 2 hypervisor because it's already running on top of the existing operating system that you're running as your desktop. So very common to see that. So I do that all the time. I'll be in my Mac OS 10 and I'll just start up Windows here, Linux there, and start moving things between all of these different devices. That's a type 2 hypervisor. If you're loading it without any operating system being there at all, then you're really using a type 1 hypervisor. You're installing it onto what we call in the server world bare metal. There's nothing there but the computer. There's no operating system. There's no boot sector. There's no nothing. Type 1 runs directly with the hardware. You don't need an additional operating system to run a Type 1 hypervisor. And that's why in this question, when I asked what type of hypervisor would be the best choice for a bare metal server with no installed operating system, the answer absolutely is C, Type 1. That's what we were looking for. These other names I have here are not really hypervisor types. Kind of made them up. I made up dedicated hypervisor, a single controller hypervisor, an orchestrator hypervisor, and a sole domain hypervisor don't really exist. I kind of made those up, sorry. So hopefully you now know Type 1 and Type 2, and you'll be able to do that as well. Work with those hypervisors. You should absolutely know whether you're doing Security Plus or not. Get some knowledge with all this virtualization. Extremely important in the IT world. Let's do another question. Here's one for you that talks about signatures. The question is, and this is a fill in the blank, so we've got a bonus question for a performance-based question. So the question is, what type of multi-factor authentication would be most associated with a signature? Now we have to know that. Now it's a fill in the blank. We don't even have options available. And is it an acronym or not? We don't know. We don't know. Hopefully you'll be able to figure that piece out. What type of multi-factor authentication would be most associated with signature? Pen and pencil. No, that's not right either. What is it? What type of multi-factor authentication? You will be using multi-factor authentication a lot through whatever you do. In fact, you're probably using a good bit of multi-factor authentication now. If you have a PayPal account, if you have an account that's a gaming account, we do multi-factor authentication. If you have an online banking system, there's multi-factor authentication. If you, I log into things here. I log into my website, there's multi-factor authentication. I'm using it everywhere. So it's important to know these different factors when you deal with multi-factor authentication. So, and it's a lot more secure. I know that somebody would have to have my phone and have it unlocked to be able to do that. So maybe you know what this is. Most associated with a signature, what could it possibly be? Well, a signature, a number of you are putting things into the answers. Some of you are mentioning, a lot of you have said something you do. Some of you have said something you are. Some of you have said something you have. Some of you said PGP, not a factor. Some of you are just putting anything in because what the heck am I talking about? These different multi-factor types, these are something you need to know for both the 401 and the 501 exam. Signatures, though, as you can see, are something you do. This is something that's very unique. You're signing something, and nobody else can really do the signature the way you do it, unless they're a fraud and they're trying to copy your signature. That's not their signature. They're trying to pretend they're you. That is definitely something you do. And handwriting analysis is a good example of something you do. One that's a little more obtuse, one that's a little more obscure, one that's a little more different than handwriting is the way people type. You ever notice when you're typing in a password you've been using a long time, it has sort of a rhythm to it? Or it has, there's just a little bit of a cadence to it. And that cadence is something you do. And it can be measured, and people can say, wait, you're not typing like you normally do, so I'm not going to allow you access. That multi-factor authentication of something you do did not pass that one because perhaps you're not the one typing. So it can be delays between keystrokes a good way. This is almost like biometrics. It's not quite biometrics. It's close to biometrics, but it's not quite there. Biometrics is something you are. Some of you did put that into the results as something you are, but that was not quite the right answer either, because the signature isn't anything that you are unless you have a tattoo of your signature on yourself. Now we'll have to think about that one and figure out if that's really what we want to do. So we don't really have any others to go through in this view. We don't, because this was a multiple choice question, but I think we got the way that one works to have all of those things there. I've got some more questions for you. I'm going to bring up the next one, though. We're fitting quite a few in here. This is one that also will apply to the 401 or the 501 exam. So for those of you studying for either one of those, this one is a good question for that. The question is, which of the following would be the least volatile? Which of the following would be the least volatile? And I have some options for you. The first one is A, backup tapes, B, CPU cache, C, routing table, D, spreadsheet file on an SSD, and E, word processing temporary file. Which of those would be the least volatile? Maybe you'd be able to answer those and figure out which one of those would be the least volatile. Now you have to know what those are. You have to understand what those pieces are. Let's see if I can show you on the screen. A is backup tapes, B is CPU cache, C is the routing table, D is a spreadsheet file on an SSD, and E is word processing temporary file. One of those would be the least volatile. If you think you know what the least volatile would be, you should see it on your screen now at professormesser.com/QA. If you are watching this on a replay, I'm sorry, we don't have a way to have you participate. You have to be here live for that, and you can always find out when the next live event is by going to professormesser.com/calendar. That'd be a good way to find out when the next live event is going to be. This is also something you should think about if you're watching this. If you are watching this live and you're on YouTube, there's no chat because we're going back and forth in the chat here. The chat's available at professormesser.com/live. Let's see how we did. Which of the following would be the least volatile? How did we do? Well, let's see. 71% of us said backup tapes. That's a pretty good number if we're trying to get a definite majority. 14% said spreadsheet file on an SSD. And then it drops down to 7% for CPU cache. 6% said word processing temporary file. And 2% said routing table. Not exactly how I thought the distribution of this would go. So the volatility of data is a pretty important thing to consider, especially when you're dealing with some type of security event, because you need to gather as much information as possible about that security event. But some data is not going to stick around as long as others. Some data will be more volatile, so it will disappear faster. Some data will be less volatile, so it will stick around for much longer. So I have a little chart in the video that talks about this for the SY0-501. It's video 5.5, gathering forensics data. And you can see one of the most volatile types of data is a CPU register or a CPU cache because it's changing a bunch of times. It's changing a couple times every second. Those CPU caches and CPU registers, those go by pretty quick. Those are extremely volatile. Routing tables, ARP caches, those stick around for a little bit longer. There's a little bit more of a timeout associated with those. You can at least count it in seconds, but it is less volatile than a CPU register. Then you get into other things like storing something on disk. That is a very good way to store information and have it stick around for a while. But of course, things can overwrite on a disk. One of the least volatile things we have on this list, let's look at this list. We know CPU cache goes by pretty quick, so it will probably not be CPU cache. We know that word processing temporary file, those get written and overwritten pretty quick when you're using word processing. So that's a little less volatile than the CPU cache. Routing table, probably in the middle of both of those. A spreadsheet file and SSD would probably be less volatile than the word processing file. But backup tapes, once you write it to a backup tapes, you usually keep those things around a really, really, really long time. They don't really go away. They are stored. You stick them somewhere for about a year or so, or even longer, because in some organizations, you're required to comply. There's particular legal regulations that you have to conform with, and keeping those around for years may be what you do from a backup perspective. So of all of these options, 70% said backup tapes. That is the least volatile of all of these. If you're watching this particular study group for continuing education unit credit, and if you don't know what that is, then you probably don't need one. But the CEUs is a good way to collect different hours of things that you're doing, and you can use those to renew different certifications, not just CompTIA's, but others as well. If you are someone who needs one of those, I will send you one. All you have to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link right at the top or bottom. And if you click that, it brings up a nice little form. You can put your name in, your email address. Make sure those are right because I need to email this back to you. And there somewhere, I need you to put, there's a whole prompt where you can put things. And I'm reading through these. You can put anything you'd like. If you'd like to put a message to me, you can. But you can, of course, also put that this is the April 2018 Security Plus Study Group and that the super secret magical word for the CEU somewhere in there needs to be backup tapes. So somewhere in there should be the words backup tapes, and I'll know, oh, you must have watched this. You must have seen where I told you to go through this. You have to follow that process. If you do not follow that process, you don't get the CEU. It's part of the whole process of knowing what to do, where to click, what to put in. And if you do that, I will send you a continuing education unit credit to have that there. Hopefully that will be something that you'll be able to do with those pieces. The CEUs they're pretty useful, although they're becoming less useful now because CompTIA has all of their single activities that you can do now to renew. So you don't necessarily have to collect CEUs like you used to. Used to be that's all you could do. You had to collect CEUs to make that happen, but now you don't have to. Now they've got things you can do, and it takes 4 to 6 hours, and you're done. You're renewed. You pay them $150. You take the online program that they have. You answer the questions, and you're renewed. It's that simple. That's kind of nice, actually. So you don't have to go through, and in fact, you don't have to pay CEU fees if you do that. There's a little tip for you. If you're one of those folks that you're just tired of paying all those fees, no fees to pay. You pay your $150. You go through their sample test of what they're doing, and you're good to go. It's another nice thing to have available with all of that. The another nice thing that you may want to be aware of is the Security Plus certification has a lot of hands-on that you have to do now. There is, in fact, a lot of different options that you would have to go through to get these labs up and running. In fact, you could put a command prompt on the 501. So you do need to know how to go through and do labs. If you've never had all these different operating systems or set up systems for encryption or had to run a VPN and set up IPsec and get all these things running, well, that could be a little bit more of a problem. Fortunately, the folks at GTS Learning have the Security Plus labs all ready to go. I have some up here. Here's some on NAT. Here's one on network vulnerabilities, IDS and honeypots, password cracking tools. That sounds good. Let's start that password cracking tools. And they have a lab that has a bunch of systems, and it looks like we're going to be doing some password cracking. And I'm going to start these systems up. You can power them on. They got tons of VPNs here. Let's power on that one. 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 That looks good. So it's now going to start up a virtual machine that hopefully you'll be able to use through the online tutorial that they have here to go through all of those pieces. And it looks like this. Got a screenshot here where you can just go through all of the labs themselves and step through all the different hardware pieces. There is also, by the way, a discount you get directly from GTS Learning if you follow this link. So if you go to professormesser.com/seclabs, you can, instead of paying $169, you pay, I think, $125. I think that's still right. You can always check the CompTIA or the GTS Learning website, and they'll be able to tell you the details behind that and what they're doing with it. What a great way to work with all of these different options that they have available for these labs. I love using the labs, and sometimes I'll pop in there just to be able to try something out and then pop out. You don't even have to follow what they're doing because they're real VPNs. That's what I like about them, is you don't have to force yourself down a particular road. If you want to try something else, if you want to let's try doing it differently, you can do that. Absolutely try it differently. You're not going to break anything. And if you just want to reset it, you can go back and reset those pieces. So find out more about that, professormesser.com/seclabs. Let's do another question. I've got one here for you. Let's pop this one up and I'll show it to you. Here it is. Which of these would be the most common implementation of a user certificate? Which of these would be the most common implementation of a user certificate? Would it be, there we go, A, digitally sign an executable, B, encrypt data from a web server, C, issue additional CA certificates, D, use as an authentication factor, or E, securely store backup files. One of these would be the most common implementation of a user certificate. Digitally sign an executable, encrypt data from a web server, issue additional CA certificates, use as an authentication factor, and securely store backup files. It's got to be one of those, right? Let's hope it's one of those. That would be. I think it is one of those. If I had to choose, I know which one I would choose. Maybe you know which one you would choose. And if you do know, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can try that out yourself. See if you happen to know. I'm going to take a sneak peek while you're doing that and see if people happen to know what this one is. You may even have one of these. If you work in an office, you may actually have a user certificate. You might even not even realize that you have a user certificate, but there may be one somewhere in your environment. I'm giving you tips here. I'm trying to not to tell what the answers are. I'm trying to give everybody a fair shot at this. Let's see how we did with this particular one. Here we go. How do we do? Well, we've got 61% say, yeah, you use that as an authentication factor. 16% said you use this user certificate to digitally sign an executable. 12% said you use it to encrypt data from a web server. 8% said you use it to issue additional CA certificates. And 2% said, well, you, of course, use it to securely store backup files. That's what you use it for. The most common implementation of a user certificate. Well, first, let's talk about what a user certificate is. What the heck is that? As the name implies, if I wanted to give you a certificate, this is effectively a digital private key that I would be handing off to you, although it could really be anything that I would put as that user certificate. It's a unique digital representation of something that only you have. Normally, we would put this user certificate on an ID card. It's very common. Inside the card itself is something where we can store just a very small certificate. Very easy to have that there. It is one that allows you to use it then as an authentication factor. Since you're the only one who has that card, and you're the only one, obviously, if you have the card that has the certificate, you can use this as a way to authenticate. Most people will do this with smart cards. So your computer at work will have a slot. You slide the card in, slide your ID card right into the slot. It stays right there. You do your work. When you're done, pull out your card and you're done. You take it to the next thing. So it's very common to use those. There's different types of smart cards in a lot of different places that do a lot of different things. But hopefully this is one that you have seen or used or looked at a video and watched someone do it. So that'd be another good thing to do as well. It's very useful to have these user certificates. But what user certificates don't do is they don't digitally sign an executable. That's not usually why you would have a user certificate. Usually you would have a code signing certificate that was specifically created to sign code. In fact, that's very common if you're a developer to have that there. Encrypting data from a web server would be, well, a web server certificate. Not to make that one quite obvious, but that's usually we would get a web server certificate, put it on the web server, and that's what's used to encrypt the data. 8% of you said to issue additional CA certificates. Well, it's usually your CA certificate that is then used to issue other CA certificates. See how that works? And securely store backup files. Well, maybe you could use a user certificate to securely store backup files, but that would probably mean that only that user would be able to restore the backup files. That's probably not what you want. You probably would want to use something that is available to everyone to decrypt that data if you're going to encrypt that information as it's storing those files. So the best answer here, the most common implementation of a user certificate in D would be D, use as an authentication factor. That would be really the best answer. That's really the only one in this list I could even remotely guess as being the correct answer. Now, I get all of these questions and everything that's here, I get directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. If you do not have your copy of the CompTIA exam objectives and you're not using it as your study checklist, you're doing yourself a disservice. this should be the first thing you download when you're ready to start your studies. A+, Network+, Security+, or any other CompTIA exam, because they put everything in these exam objectives. So if you're someone who's wondering, what do I really need to study for this exam? What could they possibly ask me about on this exam? Well, you don't have to wonder anymore. They have told you absolutely what they could be asking you on this exam. So now you have a great study list. I mentioned earlier there were over 750 topics on the SY0-501. I counted every single one of these topics. They tell you everything. That's where I got this from, is the exam objectives. So make sure you have those. If you haven't downloaded it, download it now. Get your hands on these exam objectives. They'll tell you everything you need to know. So those of you that have always asked me, I'm taking my exam next week, what should I really focus on? You should focus on everything in that list. Trust me, it is your master checklist. It tells you everything you need to know. That's what you should follow. Make sure you get your hands on that. You can get that by going to Google and Googling the CompTIA exam objectives. You can also go to professormesser.com/objectives and get it from there as well. Another place to get it. Well, you've gone through an hour of Q&A. That went quick, but I do one of these every month. And of course, you can go to my website and watch all the replays. If you want to know when the next live event's going to be, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar. All the live event dates are going to be there for the next month. The A+, the Network+, the Security+, they're all there. And of course, if this is after May the 16th of 2018, and you're watching this in a replay, you can still go to the calendar, find out when the next one's going to be. In this case, May 16th, we're going to have our next Security Plus study group, the third Wednesday of May. My A Plus study group is on the 2nd, Network Plus is on the 9th, and the Security Plus on the 16th. So that's how we're going to do that one. Stick around for the next hour, though. We've got open phone lines coming up, but we've also, unfortunately, come to the end of our Q&A. Can you believe it? Don't forget about the course notes at professormesser.com/securitycn. Of course, you can follow us, subscribe on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. Twitter is professormesser.com/Twitter. Facebook, yes, it's professormesser.com/Facebook. Just type in professormesser.com/ and the thing you want to find me on. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, it's there. That's how easy it is. Don't forget about the vouchers, professormesser.com/vouchers, and my good friends at GTS Learning for the Security Plus Labs, professormesser.com/seclabs. Well, stick around for the next hour. We've got open phone lines. We've got any topic or question you would like to talk about. We can talk about it. And if you aren't sticking around, then we will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. There is phone lines that need to be set up now to have that there. For those of you on the YouTube side, if you wanted to follow along with the chat, because we do a lot of Q&A with the chat now, you can go to professormesser.com/live and get that there. How you request a CEU, I mentioned somewhere in the first hour how you do that. So you must have missed it. You can always rewind later on. The replays of this are available immediately after. What ports are the most important to know for the exam? The ones that are in the CompTIA exam objectives. That's it. Whenever you get to a question like, what do I need to know for the exam? It's in the exam objectives. I give you the same answer every time. You'll be sick of me. Will you stop telling me it's in the exam objectives? But it is. It's in the exam objectives. It's exactly where it is. Let me start up a show. We'll get the phone lines going. And by the way, don't go outside what the exam objectives say. Stick to what's in the exam objectives. So do you need to know common ISO, IEEE standard names? If it's in the exam objectives, you do. Now, here's a good question. Is there an easy way to remember the ports? Yes, implement them. Put them into a firewall. Use the applications. Block them on your firewall. Enable them on your firewall. Do some hands-on. That's a great way to do it. Let me call into my phone lines here. This will take just a moment. As I set this up, I will call in somehow into this setting by trying to figure out what I type. There we go. And it's going to make some noise here, and it's going to tell me if I can find my, there it is. Is it? Oh, I got to turn on. There we go. And I have to type in this code. There we go. And I have to type this thing, and it says
6-digit PIN number.
All right. Then I put some type of PIN number in, right? So I'll do that, and I'll type this, and I'll click this other thing. This is so hard to do. My left hand.
Welcome, host. You are now in the host room.
See, I'm in the host room. There I am. So if you would like to call in, I'm taking your questions from the chat room. So you can go to professormesser.com/live and go to the chat room. There is also a phone line you can call in from anywhere in the continental United States, absolutely free, toll free, 855-785-RJ45. You can also call free on Skype. So if you put a +1 at the beginning, Skype allows you to make toll-free calls for free. No Skype minutes required. You can go to Skype and type +1 855-785-7545, and you can call in on the call-in line to do that. So hopefully that's something that will be working for us today. We've got a lot there. So question quick in the chat room. We've got people calling in. I'll be to you in just a moment, caller. And also when you're calling in, listen in on the phone because there's a bit of a delay. So I have a Network Plus and Security Plus certs. Well, congratulations. Do you know if I need to renew both of those or only the most advanced certification? The certification process from CompTIA is there's a lot to it on the CompTIA website, but it's worth reading through. With CompTIA, you only need to renew what they call the highest level certificate. And they have a list on their website of what they consider the lower level certificates and how they're ranked all the way up to the highest level certificates. So that's a great way to determine. So you don't have to renew them individually. You only renew one of them. And it's only the one that's ranked highest in their list of rankings. So that might help you out if you're ever in that scenario. Let's go to the phone lines. The 678 area code is there. You're there, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller.
What area code did you say?
Oh, well, it's 678, but it's you, caller. Hi, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
That's me. Okay, I'm Luis. I'm calling from the Atlanta area.
Welcome,
North
Luis.
Atlanta.
What can we do for you, sir?
Well, I just wanted to say that I appreciate and I'm thankful for all your help. I was able to get my Network Plus back in November.
Nice, congratulations.
And I got my Security Plus last week.
Fantastic.
And it was in big part thanks to your shows, the study groups, and the material that I got from you.
Which one did you take? Did you take the 401 or the 501?
I actually took the 401 just because, there's more material available, more tests.
Yep.
But now that I'm starting to prepare for the CISSP,
Nice.
I'm going to go through all the material of the 501 because presumably it has more recent and more complete technical information to prepare myself.
Well, it's certainly different, if nothing else. So that's great, and that's a good step. If you're doing, and you're in a great location, Atlanta is one that has an incredible number of options available on the security side. So you're in a great place to get that security certification and more security knowledge.
Yeah, and I wanted to in a sense, encourage other people because I'm actually not technical. Up until this point, I have never logged into a router or a switch or a firewall. I have 10 plus years experience on IT, but it's been more in the sales side as a salesperson. And more recently, I have had some experience with the management side of security and risk management. And I got my PMP a couple of years ago, which I believe helped me to get into the risk management mindset.
Yep.
That helped me into the Network Plus, that helped me into the Security Plus, that hopefully now will help me into the CISSP side without even ever being too technical until recently.
You're in an interesting place in time because there is so few resources, so few people available for security jobs in IT right now. It is a market that is just blown up in IT, and there's not enough warm bodies to go around. And I've attended a number of security conferences in Atlanta where it's a room full of CSOs, the security officers for these big companies that are in Atlanta, and they're saying we have open recs we just can't fill. We can't find enough. People are pitting us against each other, companies against company to get the best deal. So it's kind of interesting scenario where it's hard to find good security people, and the problem just continues. So you're in exactly the right place. Do you have a question for us, Louis? Or Luis, sorry.
I know. That's it. Just want to encourage other people that it's doable. I have 4 kids, full-time job, play soccer, go to church, and I found little pieces here and there, and I was able to get the information I needed to pass the test.
Good for you. So, and I think you're doing exactly the right thing, following the right path there. I think you're going to be very successful with that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for calling, Luis. Good luck. Take care. That's a great story. There is plenty of opportunity in IT. It's something that I've said, well, I've been doing this. I've had this formal company for over 10 years now. And at the very beginning, I was telling people there's opportunity everywhere. I worked in as a systems engineer for next generation firewall company that was my big last job that I stayed almost 7 years. And everybody I visited, because I visited people all over the place and tons of companies in Atlanta, and everywhere I went, there were so many different opportunities available, every single place. So you're doing exactly the right thing, Luis. Let's go back to the phones. I've got the 561 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Yeah. Hi, Professor Messer. This is Ed calling from Miami Lakes again.
Welcome, Ed. What can we do for you today?
Good. I'm fine. How are you today?
Fantastic. Another Florida connection.
Great. Listen, I wanted to get your take on something regarding a recent article in the paper, which is usually my questions when I call. But
Sure.
This one is regarding the Russian campaign to hack the routers.
Oh, yeah.
Both for people and businesses. And I was just wondering, how do you think they are going about that?
This is so many different ways, and nobody really knows exactly what's going on, because this was an alert that came out, I think it was this past week, from Homeland Security and the White House, but they didn't give detailed answers or detailed information about this. All they said was, quote, hackers tied to the Russian government have attempted to compromise millions of routers and firewalls. I got to tell you, that's not really news to anybody. That's every single country in the world is trying to gain access to routers and firewalls across the internet, including the United States. This is espionage at the deepest levels. It's governmental espionage, and it's just constant. It is, as we saw in the last major election, the presidential election a couple of years ago, we saw how people that were in that particular area of the world were gaining access to servers that we had pretty sensitive information on. So it's not like it's something that's new to us. What was interesting about this particular announcement was that they really didn't give any details. They said, "Oh yeah, they're getting into routers." I think we saw this last year with people's home routers. We saw that third parties were gaining access through a non-published vulnerability, one that nobody knew about. Were rewriting the firmware on our home routers, and from that point could watch everything that we were doing. And that was a pretty big deal, because that was millions of home routers and firewalls that were affected. But now they're sort of upping the noise level and letting people know, hey, there seems to be more things going on here against us as a country and our companies that are working here that you really need to be aware of. This is something, and as I mentioned, I was a systems engineer for a next generation firewall company for a long time, or 7 years in this industry. That's a long time, where this was a constant threat. Other countries, not just Russia, but all of the other countries in the world and other companies were trying to gain access to people's resources. And they know if they can gain access to the router or the firewall or that edge device, that they could probably get in and do almost anything on the inside. Usually the outside of our networks is very hard to get through. It's hard. It's like a piece of candy, but it's like a piece of candy that's soft on the inside. Once you get through that hard outer shell, everything on the inside seems to be relatively open. Companies are starting to change that model, but it's a little bit of a challenge. So that's where, in fact, there were some people that made comments on this story that came out this week that said, effectively, well, duh. We know Russia's going to be hacking routers. Everybody wants to hack routers. This isn't anything new. So obviously there's... Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, do you think this was an attack possibly on the default passwords of the routers that maybe people don't change because they don't know how?
I think it probably goes deeper than that. We always mention that in our courses, and when we're telling people don't use the default usernames, don't use the default passwords. It seems to be more of a problem with people's home routers, because if you look at all of the major firewalls in the industry, Palo Alto Networks, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Cisco, those are the big players in enterprise firewalls. All of those technologies make you change the password from the default before you can do anything. So they have already put in for people like me that are too dumb to change the password when you first plug it in, it makes you change the password when you first plug it in. So they're probably going across something that's a lot more unique. It could be a buffer overflow, some type of injection. They're going after some type of cross-site scripting problem, because a lot of these technologies use a web browser and JavaScript to be able to do what they do. So they're trying to find the way in. Used to be they would find their way in through email. Well, we got better with email. Then they tried to find their way in through a third-party VPN. Well, we've gotten stronger and put other things in place with that. And now they're realizing they got to go everywhere else. What's interesting about this one, it makes me wonder what really happened, because they're not giving us the whole story here, but something has happened. There's been something that is ticked up a little bit. And so it was enough tick up that one of two things: they are either really trying to warn us of a particular problem, or this is if you want to play the conspiracy game, we have all of these things going on between us and Syria and Russia. Russia wants the Syrian ports. So let's make Russia the bad guy, and here's one way to do it in the press. That's sort of the deep state version of what may be going on. We're never quite sure. And as I mentioned, you should be protecting yourself against anybody else, Russia or anywhere. We should be protecting ourselves against our allies, much less Russia.
It's right. The NSA.
Right, exactly. Inside of ourselves. But big companies, they're very concerned about that.
It just looked like, according to this article, they were targeting home routers, which I thought was something different, as opposed to corporations or government agencies.
Like, home routers are very squishy. They are not very secure, relatively speaking. I mean, relative to the routers and firewalls that you would have in an enterprise, the things that you run at home are not quite as sophisticated when it comes to security. They obviously aren't. You can't really integrate your home firewall router, wireless access point, to a Kerberos database, to your Windows domain, or the firmware on those tends to have more vulnerabilities, and the firmware on those doesn't tend to be analyzed as intensely as the bigger boxes you would put at an enterprise, because the researchers know, here's the bad part, is that we have this weird bounty process that many organizations have set up. You can get much more money by finding a vulnerability on a big firewall than you can by finding a vulnerability on somebody's little home firewall. So we're also...
Yeah, I guess there's no money in it.
There's no money in it. There's no money in on our side or their side, or it becomes a challenge. So you have to worry. And we saw, like last year, where some of this firmware was really, really, really insecure. So, of course, we got a bunch of updates for that. But now what happens? Now something has been going on. So we'll have to see where we go with that one. Is it real? Is it made up? We never know. Just protect yourself against everybody. That's the best you can do.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for taking my call, Professor Messer, and have a great day.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate the call. That's one of the challenges we have with security in general, is you really don't know who to trust. And quite honestly, with security in general, don't trust anybody. That's the best default you can have. It's interesting how whenever we have some of these events occur, whether it's a hack of that someone finds, usually there's a group of folks at a very specific consulting arm of a security company that's designed to parachute in when these types of problems occur. So a big company gets hacked, who's going to figure out what happens? There's a very specific set of things you need to do to unravel everything that happened during that hack. So you have to get people in that really know what they're doing, that have done this before, that have a process, that have procedures, that can really go back in time and find all the details. And who knows what they managed to come across. The stuff they see must be remarkable because they're not going to make it public, but they know enough to be able to tell the government, you should really warn people about the Russians because we just saw something that was really bad. So maybe that's what we're seeing. We just don't know. And one of the challenges with anything relating to security is they're not going to tell you. If they're going to tell you, now you effectively know that that's happened. That's one of the things that's the challenge when Microsoft releases updates to their operating systems. They do that once a month, and they have their Terrible Tuesday update, and they bring out all the newest patches for the month. And now people realize, oh, we're patching remote desktop because of a buffer overflow problem that allows a remote executable to run. Let's try to find out where that is. So just by giving people enough of that, the researchers jump on it and try to take advantage before you have a chance to patch it. That's always the challenges. It's a cat and mouse game. It's a constant race to stay in front, constant, every day to stay in front of these things. And we've gotten very good with malware. It used to be the Russians would get malware on your machine and your machine would call out to them. But now we've gotten very good with those as well. There's some pretty interesting ways that we're able to identify malicious code without actually running it in our environments today. So that's one of the very easy things to do. If you'd like to ask a question, you're welcome to call in. The number's up there, 855-785-7545. Also taking questions from the chat room. If you're watching on YouTube, you may want to flip over to professormesser.com/live. Same stream is there, but there's a chat room right there at the bottom, and you can put questions in there as well. Question in there, in fact, more of a career question, which is, I'm starting out in IT, have my own personal knowledge. Is it good to start with Security Plus? Well, I guess the qualified answer is that it depends whether you would start with Security Plus. One of the things that the federal government in the United States looks for are a minimum set of certifications for you to be able to work for certain groups, IT groups within the federal government, or one of the folks that works with the federal government, third-party contractors. And they want you to have a certain minimum level certification. And between A+ isn't on that list, Network+ isn't on that list, but Security Plus is on that list. So they know that the minimum to work for the federal government is Security Plus. So many of the people coming to my site are working on Security Plus as their very first IT certification because that checks the box for that particular kind of job. Now, as someone who has worked in IT security for, how long did I work there? For well over 10, 12, 13 years, and a little bit more if you count the protocol analysis side of it, that part of it requires just a huge amount of networking knowledge. So whether you're working with firewalls, intrusion prevention, integrating VPNs, understanding how to route out to a third party to set up an IPsec VPN, whether you're setting up a site-to-site VPN, all of those are very network-centric tasks. And so the more you know about routing protocols, the more you know about how IP operates, the more you know about how to configure details in a firewall. These are all networking functions. We're sort of applying the security on top of the networking. And the better you have that networking down, the more successful or the more easy it will be for you when you get into the security side of things. It's also pretty unusual for someone to start in security. It's a little bit, there's at least a few more opportunities these days because we have so few people in security. But as soon as we fill up some of those security heads, as soon as we get those warm bodies in place, it's going to be a lot different. You need so much of a base knowledge, a foundation in operating systems and networking to be able to understand how to protect the operating systems and the network. See how that works? So that's why whenever I would travel around to all of these enormous companies, I've gone to multi-billion-dollar public companies and talked to their security teams. And almost 100% of them are people that started on other parts of IT. They were in the server side and especially in the networking side. It's one of the things I found because I really moved in my career from network management, protocol analysis, reporting, performance, uptime, and availability. And I moved from that to security. It was a very common move, not just for me and what I was doing, but in the industry in general. So this turns out the same people I was talking to 5 years ago with performance and uptime and availability and protocol decodes and storing long-term packet captures. Now I walk in to talk about next generation firewalls, same people. Like, hey, it's you again. What are you doing here? Oh, we're security now. That's how it's worked out. So that was sort of the first phase. Everybody sort of moved up into security. Security was an enormous need and everybody moved onto the security side. And so security was the natural progression from the network piece. Now that we've sort of made that first phase move, now people are going back and saying, we could probably start someone in security in this particular kind of role doing this particular thing and maybe get some more people familiar. But it would require someone that at least had some knowledge of these technologies, because how are you going to secure them otherwise? Becomes more of a challenge. IT security is varied. It's broad. There's so many different topics and things you could be doing. During your day, you could be working on policies and procedures. You could be doing single sign-on. Maybe there's a single sign-on task. If you work for a hospital, maybe it's integrating people's ID badges with the not publicly available, but the centralized kiosks that you set up on a nursing floor. And of course, you have to worry about HIPAA for medical. If you work in a financial organization, there's a different set of compliance rules and regulations. If you are, maybe you're in charge of the firewall, which these days is an IPS, and it's also provides SSL decryption, and it's also looking for malware, and it's also hunting for viruses. The firewalls these days do everything. They're looking at applications. Maybe you have to set up a site-to-site VPN. Maybe that site-to-site VPN, you're going to use the certain type of certificate. Maybe you have to make sure both sides have the right certs. Maybe you're setting up an end user, remote user VPN, where somebody is using SSL VPNs to access the internal network. Well, that's a completely different set of requirements. Maybe you're setting up multi-factor authentication for your environment. Maybe you're going to need a TACAC server. Maybe you're going to need a Radius server. Maybe you need an LDAP compliant server. Maybe you use Kerberos. See all these things? Nothing I really just talked about was security, quote unquote. Really didn't talk about the details of encryption with all of those. All of those were networking functions with kind of a security layer kind of plastered right on the top. So that's why I say, is it good to start with Security Plus? It's good to start with the certification that will get you to the objectives you need for your next step. In IT, one of the most frustrating questions that I would get during an interview is somebody say, where do you see yourself in 10 years? How are you supposed to even come close to that? The entire industry changes in 10 years. There's no way to know. 10 years before I started doing this, there was no YouTube. There was no Twitter. There was no Facebook. How could I say, well, in 10 years, I see myself doing live streams and interactive Q&A in near real time to anybody in the world? If you told someone that, they would, oh, well, you're not working here. You're crazy. You're ridiculous. Let's show you the door. Thanks for coming in. We'll be in touch. I love that. We'll be in touch. So those are some dumb questions. I always tell people, what do you want to do next? What do you want to do next? That's the best question, because you should have some idea. Oh, I'd love to do that thing that guy's doing. For me, it was always whatever that guy's doing. I see what that guy's doing. That's pretty cool. I want to do that thing. And so I work my way. I'd talk to them. How'd you get to be able to do that cool thing you're doing right there? Oh, you got this cert, you did this Q&A, you did this thing, you did this hands-on, you did these projects, you work with this company. I think I should do something like that. And you sort of find your way down that path. So there is no right answer or wrong answer on, is it good to start with fill in the blank? I don't know. Is it? For what you want to do, is it good to start with Security Plus? I can't answer that for you. Nobody can answer that for you but you. So it's time to think about what the next step is, find out what that is, ask some people, how do I get to do that next thing, and then go do that. Relatively simple, really. Think about it. It'd be easy to do, to have those things there. Let's go back to the telephones. A lot of Florida today. 813 area code calling. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Zach?
Hi. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Florida in St. Petersburg.
Yes, you are, sir. What can we do for you today?
Well, I need your advice on something, and it's about the Network Plus and Security Plus. I have my A+ certification.
All right.
My Network Plus and Security Plus, they're like stepping stones, and I think that you should just get them to show progression. And
it's not a bad idea. If your goal is to show somebody progression, that's a great path.
Yeah.
What is there a particular end goal for you after you go through A+, Network Plus, Security Plus? Is there, the certifications are a means to an end. So what is the end for you? Or the next
end for me is to work at Apex Systems because I have a connection that worked at the Pentagon, and with him, I have a good recommendation, I have a clean record, and I'm getting Apex Systems to sponsor my security clearance right now. It's in the process. But I don't even have my Network Plus and Security Plus, and their A+ projects are dying out.
This is
so
great.
I'm kind of it's getting tough. So I've got to get it working.
You bring up kind of something I've mentioned in other study groups, but it is perhaps one of the most important characteristics of getting to that next step, which is, do I know anybody who works there? You don't discount the people networking that you do. I have had probably 15 different jobs in IT. The first job I got somehow out of college, but it was kind of a grunty job. I didn't know anybody there. Every single job after that, I knew somebody there. Now there's somebody who can vouch for me. They go, oh yeah, he's good to work with. He comes in on time. He does what needs to be done. He gets the job done. You don't have to worry about him leaving in the middle of something. Those are the types of things that are actually just as important as your education, your experience, and your certifications. And I think you've got a nice combo there. You've got somebody there, and they said, well, here's what you need to do to get up into this level, and now you've got a great path to go.
Exactly, and I just wanted to let you know about what my path is. I've been watching your videos. You helped me pass my A+, and I'm hopefully going to pass my Network Plus.
That's great. Get as much hands-on as possible. Get some good Q&A. Get a good book. Watch the videos. Get the exam objectives. You're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And if you want, I can always get my classroom to do a live presentation or something with you, and we could all have a study group. But I know you're a busy guy.
It might be something worth doing. I know there's also, for those of you wondering about study groups like that, occasionally on the Reddit subgroup for CompTIA, our CompTIA, there is a Discord that they have, and they will do study groups together every couple of nights. Somebody will just open up a channel or start a live stream or get on audio, and they'll go through some Q&A and do those types of things. That may be another resource for people who are watching.
That's pretty cool.
Well, great. Good luck with the Network Plus. Good luck with the Security Plus. I think you got a pretty good path ahead of you. Now it's just all about execution.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
I appreciate the call. That's exactly the way you should be going with this. That is exactly the way you should be figuring this out. What happens after this next job? I don't know. I have no idea. Usually these things tend to take care of themselves. But that's one of those things. You just never know till it happens. Let's go back to the phones. Thanks for holding 702 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Mark. I'm from Las Vegas.
Welcome, Mark. What can we do for you today?
I actually just had a quick question for you. I know that you have worked in security. I also know that you are doing training, and that's what I would like to do. I'd like to be able to start out maybe in security and move into training, or vice versa, and I'd like to see what your thoughts might be on that.
Sure. One of the things I've found as being kind of a standard throughout my entire career was that there was always sort of a training component, and you'll find this happens no matter where you go or what you do. The last job I had was a very technical job in IT security. It was working as a pre-sales systems engineer for a next generation firewall company. Actually, the first next generation firewall company where there were no next generation firewalls when I started. So a lot of what I did during the first year of my job was walking into the door of somebody's office and saying, I have a completely new idea in firewalls to tell you about called next generation firewalls, where I can identify every application going over your network. And they're like, no, you can't. And I'd have to effectively show them. You have to train your customers. No, this is exactly how this works. And you go through this process. One of the nice things about those types of roles, though, especially one that's a systems engineer role where you're demonstrating the functionality of a particular product, you're finding out what someone's needs are, and you're putting together evaluations, and you're showing people that this really does what you need it to do, is that the companies themselves not only train you on the technology part of it, because there's an enormous complex technology that makes all of this run, but they also talk to you about how do you explain to people how this works. And I would go to training classes on how to speak, literally classes where they would videotape you and say, give us 2 minutes on this topic. And you would talk. And at the end of it, you look at the tape and they go, well, you stuck your hands in your pockets and you were shuffling your feet, and you should probably face us when you're talking. You know, those types of things. And that was a great experience. You sort of learn that as you go. And then you also get training on how do you follow this path? How do you set up this project and follow this from the beginning to the end? This was sort of a natural adjunct to that. So I was able to take this practical experience in the field and then roll it into how do I explain to somebody else how all of these things work together. And hopefully I've been able to put some of that into the videos, that it's sort of a building block of how all of these things work out. That was the path I took, but it's not doesn't have to be the same path for everybody else. It's really more about taking an idea, splitting it up into its most basic chunks, and then going through each one of those chunks to be able to put it all back together again. And if you can do that in a way that makes sense to people, then you're ready to start training.
Okay. I have one other question, just more specific. I do have my Network+, and I'm working on getting my Security+.
Okay.
I was hoping you take it today. I'm going to push it back till tomorrow. But what I'm really hoping is, if you could tell me, how can I get advice from people in the field? I don't know a lot of people who work directly in security, and that's kind of where I want to get into.
Sure.
And in order to get that advice that we were talking about before, how would I approach maybe a hiring manager, either in an interview or just over the phone, and ask them those things?
Well, you're in a very unique part of the world for security. There's not only the normal types of security roles that you would see with a hospital, a financial company, the normal things you would have in anybody's relatively large metropolitan area, but you've also got a very unique gambling, security, financial side that applies to this as well. And in your particular area, there is a Microsoft user group. There's a Cisco user group. There may be a network or a Palo Alto Networks user group. There might be a Checkpoint user group, or there might be an ISSA is another security group that's relatively that way. They talk about everything related to security. What is their website? Is it issa.org? ISSA, the Information Systems Security Association.org. These are user groups, and it's a bunch of people that get together and talk about Microsoft, VMware, security, whatever the user group, Cisco, whatever the user group happens to be. If you're interested in security, ISSA is a very good one for going to those meetings. I did a lot of presentations at ISSA meetings showing them next generation firewall technology and what it did and how it worked, and it was emerging and people are just starting to see it. So you get to see a lot of newer technologies come through, but perhaps more importantly, it's a great opportunity to network. You get to meet people that are already working in the field. You introduce yourself. There's usually pizza and drinks. You have sodas. You could sit around. It's not always someone talking in the front of the room. And you should absolutely go up to people, go, hey, my name's blah, blah, blah. What's your name? What do you do? Where are you from? Why are you here? What do you guys do? Oh, you do this? I'm working on getting my Security Plus. If I was going to work in your organization, what type of things would you recommend I do? What a great question. That is, and people at these meetings love to talk about those things. And one of the things I found wherever I went, it's a very small community, and it's usually very regional. You go to this meeting, you meet these people, they're the ones doing security in their areas, or they're putting together the servers, or they're putting together the virtualization, or they're putting together the Cisco routing infrastructure, and they all know each other. So the more of these user groups you go to and the more people you meet, the more people you're going to know that are already working in these organizations. And so when you go to apply, or you would like to apply, they would also like you to give them your resume so they can give it to their HR department, because there's usually in these larger companies, you get money for bringing people in. So they get a finder's fee if you happen to be hired and you work there. So usually people are always keeping the ears open for somebody knowledgeable. Go, oh yeah, you should send me your resume if you're interested in working here, because then I can put my name on it. And if you get hired, you get money, and I also get money. There's a little bonus for everybody. But the user group meetings are a great place to go. It's not a huge time suck. It's fun. You'll learn things. You meet people. There's food. There's soda. What more could you ask for? That's a great way to network. And you'll start to see the same people over and over, become more comfortable. They'll know who you are. And as I mentioned earlier, people like to hire people they know. And that's a great way to get in the door.
I know I already said I had one more question. I just have another.
Sure. One more.
Would you recommend getting the CompTIA Technical Training Certificate?
I don't know. I don't have the CompTIA Technical Training Certificate. I've never really looked at the details of that cert. I don't think I've ever looked at the exam objectives for that certification, but a lot of people have that. There is a CompTIA certified instructor, or CompTIA instructor, not certified instructor, but they have a CompTIA instructor user group on LinkedIn. That's another great place to market. If you're going to these user group meetings, make sure you have a LinkedIn account and make sure you connect with the people that you find there. And I know they have a group there where they talk about these things. I've never really gone through that because I'm not working for someone who requires that I have that technical training certification. I feel that I can do it fine. So I'm not going to force myself to go get one. I've never looked into it, but so many people have it. CompTIA probably requires the people that are giving their certifications have that. I think it only makes sense that you should give it a shot, at least give it a look and see what other people are doing with it. Again, it depends on what your next step is going to be and what makes sense for you to spend your time to get to that next step.
Okay, well, thank you. That's really good advice. I'm glad that you shared that with me. And your videos have been very helpful. Thank you very much. Thanks,
Mark. Good luck. That's always mention on these user groups about the people networking part. So important. I got to see so many people over and over. You get to know the people in the industry, what they're doing, who they know, and they're more than happy to help. Ask them directly. If I was to come work for you, I love what you guys are doing. If you need somebody to do this, what do I need to do? They'll tell you. Or you'll need anything, or you need this certification, or you need this kind of experience, or you need this thing. And what better to focus on than what they tell you you're going to need? There's really no question. To the 808 area code, are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey there, I'm Dane, calling from Reno.
Oh, welcome.
Nevada.
Welcome again from Nevada.
Right,
what can we do for you?
Well, actually, the last caller answered a lot of my questions. And in a similar position, I got just past my Network Plus about a week ago.
Nice.
And I'm now trying to decide I'm trying to get into the industry, networking industry, and security ultimately. But I'm like at a crossroads. Do I go for the Security Plus and try and get in to security immediately, or get an employment with the Network Plus while taking the Security Plus and get that experience, put a few years in? Just kind of trying to figure out where to go next. So I was kind of wondering, just get some general advice type of thing.
There really is no normal path into security. It is such a young type of industry, and the number of people we need to fill warm bodies is so much. We have so many open recs right now for security at many different levels. I know a lot of people, if you look at the chats online and you look at people who are doing security, they want to be into penetration testing. They want to be a pen tester. And I try not to burst bubbles because there are penetration testing jobs out there. There's plenty of pen test jobs to be had, but it's such a small number compared to the other IT security jobs that are available that it's more common for somebody to have an enterprise IT security role where they're managing firewalls, VPNs, intrusion prevention. They're setting policies. They're looking through logs. They're configuring the SIMs. They're setting up a single sign-on. They're configuring their multi-factor authentication. Think of all that stuff I just mentioned, or you could be a pen tester. That's why there's so few pen testing jobs, because it's so niche. But they're fun jobs. I guess that's why people sort of move in that direction, because what a neat idea to do that kind of thing. Well, of course, that makes perfect sense. And I think there's a lot of push in the industry to get people certified on that type of technology, but there needs to be some type of sanity check for most people to let them know, that's not what we're doing out here. We aren't doing pen testing all day. Right. That's not our jobs. We're doing much more practical security.
I got a degree in computer science from University of Hawaii, and right out of university, I was wanting to become a pen tester. I took a class from Joe, I can't remember his last name. But anyways, took a class in pen testing and soon realized just how much that industry changed constantly and how on the ball you had to be.
And it's remarkable.
Everything's constantly shifting.
And even pen testing has different niches. Like you get into, you get into forensics. How about forensics in just Windows? How about forensics just in Windows 10? It's constant change. And that's interesting and exciting, and there's lots to do there. But it's also not a ton of jobs when you look at all the rest of IT jobs that are out there. I think your direction, though, is a good one. As I mentioned earlier, the more foundation you have in networking, the better you're going to be in IT security. That's just the way that IT security is and all of the different networking aspects of that particular job. But people are hiring these days security people, and they're just going to train them as they go because they need somebody to help out with these open requisitions that they have. That's not everywhere. It's very geographical in those patches. But I think the people that have more networking knowledge are better positioned to get a security role. I'll give you an example. There was one of the SE managers when I worked at Palo Alto Networks would bring people in for an interview for pre-sales systems engineer. This is someone who would be able to know everything and implement and architect these next generation firewalls, in some cases these monster systems, into these very complex enterprise networks. And the first question they'd ask is, tell me everything you know about ARP. Well, that's not a security question. In fact, ARP has no security associated with it, but he'd want to know how much that person knew about networking, because you're going to need to implement these firewalls at layer 3 and integrate with all the other networking that's in the environment, maybe in high availability mode. You might be working with dynamic routing protocols. You're definitely going to need to know your IP subnetting. You're probably going to need to integrate some things at layer 2, so there'll be switching. Some things you might not even integrate it at layer 3 or 2. Maybe it's layer 1 and you're a bump in the wire. How you integrate that into a redundant switching architecture. Those are all networking questions. So it was very strong from the get-go that we wanted systems engineers that would be very knowledgeable in networking and we can teach them the rest of the firewall stuff because if you knew the networking piece, we got you on the security side. We can teach you the security plus security details. It's really knowing all of that very complex architecture and protocols down at the network level that was usually the biggest challenge for finding knowledgeable security engineers. So I think the idea that you had of let me go get some real security knowledge before jumping into security, probably going to serve you pretty well.
All right. Well, I just want to, one last thing, I want to thank you for what you do. The only thing I purchased going for Network Plus besides the exam itself was your exam course notes.
Oh, great.
Right. And with that, basically Wikipedia, was able to pass the thing. So it's just huge that those course notes, just being able to bullet point everything, like important details. But that said, the exam itself, CompTIA really writes those questions in a unique way. They word things differently than any exam or practice exams that I was able to find. Yours were, really good, but they still couldn't match that, the way they deliver. So it's really just that experience and that understanding, that the deep understanding of what you're talking about with the protocols and the interactions between systems that gets you through. Just memorizing, say, even just the notes in general, that wouldn't get you through.
That's
so
right.
It's interesting, but I appreciate everything you do.
Absolutely. You're more than welcome, sir, and best of luck with all the networking pieces and the security side.
All right. Thank you.
That's one of the things that's always sort of been the challenge with CompTIA, and I don't know how they put their questions together. I'm not at all involved in the process. I don't want to be involved in the process. The challenge people have after they come out of the exam is why does it seem like they took a perfectly normal question and they ran it through Google Translate into Russian, and then they came back and translated it back to English, and that's what they gave us on the exam. And I don't know why they make the questions the hard part. And it drives me, and this is not just CompTIA, it's any industry certification exam. For some reason, they don't write questions to get people to answer what they know. You have to decipher the question. I don't know what that's about. I could not write questions that way if I wanted to because I couldn't live with myself. So I try to make questions instead, my questions that I create. I have my pop quiz questions and the ones we do in these study groups. I try to make two-step questions where here's a term, CCNP. Yeah, but how do you use that? So you have to know what the first thing is, step one, so that you can then apply it, step two. So most of the questions I write are step one, step two questions, just so that you'll be prepared when you get to a point where somebody throws you a curveball on the exam. Whoa, how am I getting from point A to point B to point C to point D? You've already sort of had that process before. So maybe that will work, maybe not. Caller, thanks for holding for so long. 323 area code. Where are you calling from? What's your name?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Professor. This is Narbe from Iran.
Well, thanks for calling. What question do you have?
Thank you for your great class. I just want to ask you two questions. The first one is, I have a work deadline in 3 months, and I need to leave my current job as a software developer. So I need to work for another company in 3 months, and I need to get that Security Plus exam certificate.
Okay,
and right now I'm working. Right now I'm working on 401, which it seems that it's going to be discontinued. So I just want to know that if it's logical and rational to switch to 501 and study for 2 months, or just stick on this current 401. What's your opinion about that?
The two exams, the 401 and the 501, they might as well be completely different exams. There's, as I mentioned earlier in the study group,
Chad said that.
So much that's new. It's so different. But the 401, because it's been around for so long, there is tons of content out there and available from so many more books than 501, so many more Q&As than 501, so much more content in general available for the 401. And the 401 doesn't retire until the end of July. So you've got April, May, June, you got 3 months to get that certification before it's retired. And it sounds like that fits into your time frame. So if you've already been studying the 401, keep studying the 401. You get exactly the same cert. If somebody says, well, what certification did you get? You got the Security Plus, because it doesn't matter which exam you take, you still earn exactly the same certification. I would recommend keep going with the 401. That's going to be your best bet when it comes time to take the exam.
Oh, is that still acceptable after the termination?
Yeah, and that's what some people worry about is they'll get their certification, but the 401 exam is going to retire. What does that mean to your certification? It means nothing to your certification. When they retire the questions, and you are already certified, if you went in on July the 31st and you took the Security Plus certification exam and you passed it, and the following day the SY0-401 is retired, doesn't mean anything. You already earned your certification, and it's good for 3 years. They could change the exam 30 times in the next 3 years, means nothing to you. In fact, you'll probably never take the exam again. You'll simply just renew it with other things as you go along. So that's the real important part. It's a good question. When they retire the exam, doesn't have any impact on anyone who's already certified.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for your helpful class.
Absolutely. Appreciate the call. That's always a challenge whenever you get into, everybody does it different. Microsoft does it differently. VMware does it differently. Cisco does it differently, but there's similarities here and there. So you'll have to decipher based on the renewal part from CompTIA. Let's go back to the calls, the 706 area code. I hear you, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor Messer. This is Edwin, calling from Pennsylvania.
Welcome. What can we do for you?
Yes, I was watching your video and you talked about the GTS hands-on learning labs.
Right.
Because I have no prior knowledge, no network background or security background, and I'm thinking of planning on going into security. So I wanted to find out what would it entail? Would it give, because I would like to see how get an idea on how implement firewalls and all those technical details. So I'm thinking of going to get your labs, but I just wanted to have an idea what would it entail, because I didn't really get it from when I was watching your video. I kind of skipped that part. I went out of the room and came back. So
no problem. It's one of the things I like about it is they really focus on hitting the objectives that are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. And if I was to look through, in fact, let's look through the 501 Security Plus labs right now. Just the beginning of them: firewall rule-based management, firewalls and evasion, NAT and OpenSSH, network vulnerabilities part 1, network vulnerabilities part 2, application data, establish host security, configuring IDS and honeypots, and the one that I chose, which was password cracking tools. In fact, you can see some of these Linux boxes are booting up. I popped back in there to have a look at it. There's a Fedora that's configured on this machine, and you can log in. I don't know what the root login is. It has it in the instructions for this. But you can go to any of these servers. There's a Windows 10 box that's booting up and available. And they set up all of these labs so that you can sit in here. Oh, look, there's Wireshark. I love running packet capture. So I'm going to start up. I'm not even paying attention to the actual things that are there. I just look, they have a rule already set up. I want everything. Get rid of these capture filters. Who wants that? There's no interfaces on here. They must have files you have to load to be able to do this. And so I get to go through all of these. Oh, look, vulnerable network captures. I'm having a good time while I'm on the phone with you. And there's some packet captures that you can go through to see vulnerabilities that might be on the network. And it just keeps going and going and going. And on that link on my website, which is to professormesser.com/seclabs, I think it is. They give a big list of all of the things they cover, but you can see on the screen, if you wanted to take a look, all of these different topics associated with these Security Plus labs. Everything from data encryption, managing certificates, configuring Radius servers, implementing Active Directory Federation services, understanding PKI concepts, encryption, hashing, social engineering. They're all in here. So that's another great place to go if you're interested in getting some hands-on, because they've already done the work of setting up the labs. All you now have to do is just step through them, and they've got step-by-step. Here's what you type. Here's what the screen looks like. They've got a nice breakdown of all of the different things that you do. In fact, if I'm on my screen, I wasn't paying attention to the steps, but you can see they've got screenshots of all of these. You can pop out the screen so it's much bigger and you can read them and step through all the pieces. Look, they go into detail. Pretty good labs. I use them to do a lot of the screenshots for my videos because they've already got it running. I'll just pop open the Linux screen and grab that one, and that's something now everybody can look at.
Okay, so you can practice like alongside the training and okay. But when I went to the Sec Labs, it took me to like a fast track study guide plus practice labs.
Yeah, the way
and
that
then it also had like
GTS Learning combines all these things together. So GTS Learning has been making books for CompTIA exams for a very long time. And last month they were actually acquired. The announcement was made they were acquired by CompTIA. So now those are the CompTIA books, effectively. CompTIA is now getting into the publishing business. So those books from GTS Learning are the CompTIA books. And what they do is if you get the labs, they bundle the book along with it. Or if you just want the book, you can just buy the book. And there's a link on the page where you can add the labs in, and then you can learn more about the labs from that link as well.
Oh, okay. Because I just wanted the labs because I already got like your study notes already. So, and I already have a book.
Yeah, they just figure if you get the labs, they throw their book in for free. They throw their Q&A in for free as an incentive to say, well, you're getting the labs, so let's give you some extra value with this as well.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you very much for your help.
Thanks, Edwin. Appreciate the call. That's always whenever I go through the labs, I try all kinds of different things. I like the what were the things they had there with the I want to see more about these vulnerable. I haven't seen these before. These vulnerable packet captures that they have. That's good stuff. I'd love to see more. Now I have something to do this afternoon. I already have something to do this afternoon. Probably not going to be that. Now that I think about it, let's go back to the chat room. If you are following us on professormesser.com/live, there's a chat room in there to have all of those pieces available. Let's have a look at what people are doing. Yeah, we were talking earlier about the paths that you have with different certifications. Somebody mentioned that CompTIA has a certification map that can give you some ideas of what path you might want to follow to get from point A to point B. Of course, you don't have to follow their path. You can make your own, but it's a good way to kind of in your mind, how do you get from here to there? And they can say, well, you can do these things to get from here to there. You look for the CompTIA certification map to be able to see those things that are there. Kind of useful to have available. And those pieces. There's a lot going on this side. I have Network Plus videos that are going up right now. I know we just finished the Security Plus study group. I've been shooting Network Plus videos for a couple of months now. We're getting close to the end. I think I have 7 videos that I need to shoot, and I'm done with the main production piece. So that will be nice when we get through that and have a chance to take a step back and go through some of these other pieces that are there. I've got also on that Network Plus, there's a whole section of security. So you're going to find if you're taking Security Plus, at least the 501, and you've already taken the new Security Plus N10007, you're going to find there's a section there where there's a good bit of overlap. So that might help you if you're moving from one to the other and you're finally deciding to take the 501, you're going to see a lot of topics that were also covered on the Network Plus. So that I think that will help a number of people that are getting into the more security side of things that, okay, I can see there's this overlap from what we were doing. Or if you're going backwards, if you're going from Security Plus to Network Plus, you've got a little bit of overlap there as well. That might help you if you're getting into that side of things. Whenever I start getting into where do I go next with this, it helps when you can recognize some of those things and going with those pieces. Well, we've gone through an hour of after show. Wow. There's a lot we were able to get through today. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Thank you for being here in the first hour and going through the Q&A. Thank you for your phone calls. Thank you for your questions in the chat room. Thank you for just being here and your support. Would not be able to have these events, would not be able to create these videos without you. And your help and your support to the site does go a long way. Thank you so much for that. We've got plenty more happening next month. Feel free to check in with us at the beginning of, we're getting into May. So in the first Wednesday of May is my A+ study group. The second Wednesday of May is Network+, and the third is going to be Security+. So feel free to join us then as well. We'd love to have you on all three of them. Feel free to step in, and you can always find out what's going at professormesser.com/calendar. Well, thanks for joining us this time. We will see you next time on the Professor Messer Security+ Study Group.